Right. Man, have things changed. The class of 2021, the second half of their experience has been like something none other. You are someone who's on the M1 and 2 and M3 and 4 curriculum committee, so you're probably the perfect person to ask. But from a resident perspective, I've seen how physicians have responded, how healthcare workers have responded. But what was the medical school's response like when COVID first hit, when the lockdowns were happening?
The first lockdown happened. I had an in-person required physician and society section, and the administration said, "Go forward with that. I can't personally cancel a lecture or course." And I was told that afternoon, "Go forward. You cannot cancel your class." And so I got a stream of emails from students saying, "What's going on? Or should we stay in?" So at about 2:00 in the morning, I send an email to the dean requesting, "I think we need to cancel this class," and then kind of made an executive decision when I didn't hear back by 4:00 in the morning. And that was the launch of COVID and teaching in the classroom, that we canceled the session down, and we have never met together in person as physician societies since that day.
Since that day?
No.
Wow. But we already had in place, I feel like here at Cincinnati, a very good system of streaming lectures, being able to download them afterwards. So was that a difficult transition? I won't quote the actual statistics, but I know the majority of medical students do not attend the lectures. They just consume them sort of virtually or peripherally.
You're absolutely right. The majority of didactic lectures are recorded, and students love to listen to them at double speed. It seems far more efficient to do their work that way. But there are some elements of medical school that just don't really translate to the virtual world. So things like gross anatomy, clinical skills, and even in Physician and Society, which is dedicated to physician identity formation and a lot of things that build on empathy and interaction, they become really very intimate, sort of small group experiences that we have had to learn how to take them into a virtual environment. So there was a fair amount of transition that had to happen for the things that were much more tactile than the streaming lectures. So it has been an adventure this last year and a half.
Something else that we do amongst the first 2 years is we have our learning communities. And so you're with 11 to 12, 13 co-medical students, and you meet weekly. You're involved in the gross anatomy cadaver dissections with them. And so you form a small mini community just by virtue of being a medical student here. And I'm assuming they didn't have that, at least the medical students starting in the pandemic.
No.
What efforts are made to try to formally foster some sort of camaraderie or togetherness? Because so much of that just organically happens during orientation when you start medical school. But in the midst of a pandemic, I'm assuming on the record, a lot of that just wasn't happening.
It didn't, for the large part. And if you ask me what the greatest loss was of the COVID year, it was that sense of camaraderie. Fortunately for the M2s, they had a year already of kind of consolidating as a class, forming their identity, getting to know classmates and being able to tap into that network in spite of being isolated at home. The M1s walked into medical school, many of them from other cities, not connected to Cincinnati, not connected to UC at all, and not knowing their classmates. And the first time that they really kind of all got together and got to meet each other was in longitudinal clinical skills, LPCC. And that was in February. So for the majority of the year, they met by Zoom in their LCs, but not that sense of camaraderie, class, identity.
It permeates, even just thinking about this as we're talking about it now, it permeates even much more than just starting medical school, because for people who are coming from out of town, they are, and if they're not familiar with Cincinnati, they're trying to find an apartment, they're trying to find a house. Maybe they have to fly here to get here. And there's all this unknown, up in the air stuff about air travel, the safety of it. A lot of apartments are not doing in-person tours or visits. So much of that is virtual. And so you're trying to make these very big, life-altering decisions at the start of what is going to be a life-altering experience over the next 4 years that will ultimately shape who you are and what you're going to do for the rest of your life, almost on a whim, almost on a leap of faith, without a lot of direction. And it was a very new experience, I'm sure, for everyone, the administration, the people involved with orienting medical students, getting them involved.
Lots of challenges. And for example, and you're exactly right, coming to a new city, a new environment of medical school, not having in-person lectures, and the administration spent really endless hours at night, on the weekend, and we were really flying the plane and building it all at the same time. For example, when we came into the winter holiday, we didn't know how long it would be, whether we would allow students to go home and do classwork from home, when we would require them to come back. And so there was that ambiguity that just really surrounded the students on top of everything else of how their year would play out. And so it has really been very demanding for them. And as you mentioned, just interacting with physicians, being in the clinics, shadowing, getting an idea of what direction their career is going to go. All of those things were really truncated this year.
I'm sure. I almost feel like maybe it was, in some aspects, the M3s and M4s who were more affected, but at the same time, they had those first 2 years prior to COVID hitting that they kind of were in the system. They knew each other. They had that conversation.